The morning light came slanted and cold through the open bay door of Harley's garage, catching the dust that hung in the air like tiny stars. Harley Brennan stood at his workbench, hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee gone lukewarm, staring at the stack of envelopes he'd been avoiding for 3 days. His knuckles were swollen, the arthritis worse in November, but that wasn't what made his hands shake. The top envelope had a red stamp across it. Final notice. He was 72 years old, and he'd owned this garage for 46 of them. His wife Margaret had kept the books at that same desk in the corner office until the cancer took her 2 years back. The treatments had cost everything they'd saved, and then some. Now the medical debt collectors were circling, and the developer who'd been buying up Main Street had made 3 offers in 6 months, each one lower than the last. Harley knew what that meant. They were waiting for him to break. The rumble of motorcycle engines pulled him from his thoughts. Not the polite purr of a touring bike, but the deep, irregular bark of something broken. Harley set down his mug and walked to the bay door, squinting into the autumn sun. 3 Harleys rolled into his lot, their riders dressed in leather and denim, patches on their backs that read, "Hell's Angels," in bold letters. The lead bike coughed black smoke and limped to a stop 10 feet from where Harley stood. The rider swung off, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with a gray-streaked beard and eyes that had seen the hard miles. He pulled off his gloves and nodded once. "You Harley Brennan?" His voice was gravel and smoke. "That's what the sign says," Harley replied, nodding toward the faded letters above the door. The man smiled, just barely. "Marcus Calloway. Friends call me Wrench. Heard you're the only mechanic between here and Billings who knows his way around a shovelhead without a computer telling him what to think." Harley glanced at the bike, already cataloging the problems by sound alone. Blown head gasket, fouled plugs, maybe a cracked cylinder. "Heard right," he said, "but I'm backed up about a week, and parts for a bike that old don't come cheap or fast." Wrench looked back at his companions, then at the garage. His gaze lingered on the property for sale sign leaning against the fence, half hidden behind a stack of old tires. "We're passing through," he said, "heading north for a funeral. Brother of ours. I can wait a day, maybe 2, but not a week." Harley knew he should say no. He had 3 cars waiting and a tow truck bill he couldn't pay. But something in the man's face, the quiet respect in how he'd asked, made Harley think of his own son, dead in Iraq 15 years now. He sighed. "I'll take a look." No promises. It took Harley most of the day. His young apprentice Danny showed up at noon and helped pull the engine, but the real work was Harley's alone, the kind that required 50 years of feel and instinct. By 6 o'clock, with the sun going down, red and cold behind the mountains, the bike was running clean and strong. Wrench and his brothers had waited in the diner across the street, coming back when they heard the engine roar to life. Wrench walked a slow circle around the bike, listening, nodding. "What do I owe you?" Harley wiped his hands on a rag, thinking of the number. Parts, labor, the day he'd lost on other work. 400, maybe 5, if he was fair to himself. He opened his mouth to say it, then stopped. Margaret's voice was in his head, the way she used to talk about the young soldiers who'd come through town on their way to the base, how she'd always slip them a free meal or a tank of gas. "Kindness costs us nothing we can't afford to lose," she used to say. "No charge," Harley said. "You're heading to a funeral." That's enough weight to carry. Wrench stared at him for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. He reached for his wallet anyway, but Harley shook his head. "I mean it. Just ride safe and remember where you got fixed when you pass back through." Wrench put his wallet away, slowly. He looked at the garage again, at the old man with the swollen hands and the tired eyes, and then he nodded once, solemn as a vow. "I'll remember," he said. The 3 bikes fired up together, a chorus of chrome and thunder, and rolled out onto Route 12, heading north. Harley watched until their taillights disappeared into the dusk, then turned back to the garage. The envelopes were still on his workbench, waiting. He picked up the top one, the red stamped warning, and set it aside. Tomorrow, he told himself. He'd deal with it tomorrow. What he didn't see was Wrench pulling over 2 miles up the road, taking out his phone, and making a call that lasted 7 minutes. What he didn't hear was the question Wrench asked, or the answer that came back, or the plan that started forming in the quiet between the words. The next morning came with frost on the windshields and a sky the color of old bone. Harley arrived at the garage before dawn, the way he always did, and found Danny already there, sweeping out the bay. The kid was a good worker, quiet and eager, but Harley knew he couldn't afford to keep him much longer, not with the way things were going. "Mr. Brennan," Danny said, setting the broom aside, "that guy from yesterday, the biker. He left something for you." Harley frowned. "Left what?" Danny pointed to the workbench. Tucked under the coffee mug was a $50 bill and a note written on the back of a gas station receipt. Harley picked it up, squinting at the rough handwriting. "For the coffee and the kindness." W. Harley folded the bill into his shirt pocket and threw the note away, but something about it stayed with him all morning. He worked on Mrs. Chen's Buick, replacing brake pads that should have been changed a year ago, and tried not to think about the appointment he had at noon. At 11:30, a silver Lexus pulled into the lot. Two men in suits got out, one carrying a briefcase, the other holding a tablet. Harley recognized them. The developer's people. They'd been by twice before, always polite, always persistent. The one with the briefcase smiled too wide. "Mr. Brennan," he said, extending a hand Harley didn't take. "Greg Pallister, Horizon Development Group. We spoke last month." "I remember," Harley said, "and I told you I'm not selling." Pallister's smile didn't waver. "I understand your attachment to this place, I really do, but we're prepared to make you a very fair offer, especially given your current financial situation." He said it gently, like he was doing Harley a favor by knowing his business. The other man, younger and sharper, pulled up something on his tablet. "We're aware of the outstanding medical debt in your name, roughly $83,000, currently in collections. Our offer would cover that, plus give you enough to retire comfortably. You could move closer to family, enjoy your remaining years without this burden." Harley's jaw tightened. "I don't have family. This garage is what I got left of my wife, and I'm not handing it over, so you can tear it down and put up another chain hotel." Pallister's smile finally faded. "Mr. Brennan, I'm trying to help you. The bank's going to foreclose in 60 days if you can't make your payments. We're offering you a way out with your dignity intact." "My dignity's fine," Harley said. "You can leave now." They left, but not before Pallister set a business card on the workbench, right where the note had been. "In case you change your mind," he said. Harley watched them drive away, then picked up the card and tore it in half. Danny stood in the doorway, looking worried. "You really got 60 days?" he asked quietly. "Less," Harley admitted, "but I'll figure something out." That afternoon, Pastor Tom Henley stopped by with a casserole from the church potluck and an offer to pray. Harley accepted the casserole but declined the prayer. "God helps those who help themselves," he said, not unkindly, "and I'm still working on my part." Tom nodded, understanding. "The congregation knows what you're facing, Harley. If you need help—" "I don't take charity," Harley said, the words harder than he meant them. "It's not charity," Tom replied. "It's community. There's a difference." But Harley shook his head, and Tom left without pressing. After he was gone, Harley sat in Margaret's old office chair and opened the drawer where she used to keep the books. Inside was a photo of the two of them on their wedding day, 48 years ago, standing in front of this same garage when it was new and full of promise. He touched the edge of the frame, then closed the drawer. The week crawled by. Harley worked longer hours, took jobs he would have turned down a year ago, and watched the numbers in his checkbook refuse to add up right. On Friday, a letter came from the bank, formal and cold, outlining the foreclosure timeline. 60 days had become 53. That same afternoon, Beth Kramer from the diner brought over a pot of chili and sat with him while he ate. She'd known Margaret, had served coffee to both of them for 30 years, and she didn't try to fix anything with words. She just sat, and that was enough. "You know," she said after a while, "that biker you helped last week, big guy, beard, leather vest, he came into the diner before he left town, asked a lot of questions about you." Harley looked up. "What kind of questions?" "How long you'd been here. Whether you had family. What kind of man you were." Beth smiled a little. "I told him the truth, that you were stubborn as a mule and twice as loyal, and that this town wouldn't be the same without you." Harley grunted, uncomfortable with the praise. "He say why he was asking?" "No," Beth said, "but he listened like it mattered." 2 days later, on Sunday morning, Harley was at the garage doing inventory when he heard the sound. It started as a distant rumble, like thunder rolling across the plains, and grew steadily louder. He walked out into the lot and looked west down Route 12. The motorcycles came in formation, 2 columns of them, stretching back as far as he could see. 20, 30, maybe 40 bikes, all Harleys, all ridden by men and women in leather, with the same patches on their backs. They slowed as they reached the garage, engines dropping to a deep idle, and then they turned in, one after another, filling his lot and spilling out onto the street. Wrench was at the front. He shut off his bike and swung down, pulling off his helmet, and walked straight to Harley. Behind him, the other riders dismounted, silent and watchful. "Harley Brennan," Wrench said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You helped a brother in need. Didn't ask for anything, didn't expect anything. That kind of respect doesn't go unnoticed." Harley looked at the crowd, his throat tight. "I just fixed a bike." "You did more than that," Wrench said, "and now we're here to return the favor." From the back of the group, a woman stepped forward carrying a lockbox. She opened it and pulled out a thick envelope. "We took up a collection," she said. "Every chapter between here and Seattle contributed. Brothers, sisters, friends of the club. People who understand what it means when someone shows kindness without counting the cost." Wrench took the envelope and held it out. $85,000, pays off your debt, gives you a little breathing room. Harley stared at the envelope like it might disappear if he touched it. His hands started to shake, and this time it wasn't the arthritis. "I can't take this," he said, his voice cracking. "It's too much." "It's what you're owed," Wrench said firmly. "You gave when you had nothing to give. That kind of thing matters to us. We take care of our own, and as of 2 weeks ago, you became one of us." Harley looked around at the faces, weathered and scarred and absolutely sincere, and something broke loose in his chest. He took the envelope with both hands, holding it like it was made of glass. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Wrench replied. "Just keep this place running. Keep fixing bikes for people who need it, and if you ever need us again, you call." He pulled out another card, this one with a phone number written in the same rough handwriting as the note. "Day or night, we ride for family." Harley nodded, unable to speak. Around him, the bikers started their engines again, a symphony of chrome and thunder that rattled the windows of every building on Main Street. They rolled out in formation, 2 columns heading north, and Harley stood in the morning sun and watched them go until the last bike disappeared over the horizon. Danny came running from across the street, eyes wide. "Mr. Brennan, what just happened?" Harley looked down at the envelope in his hands, then up at the sign above the garage door. "I think," he said slowly, "I just got reminded what community looks like." That afternoon, he drove to the bank and paid off every cent of the medical debt. The teller, a young woman who'd watched the foreclosure paperwork cross her desk a dozen times, smiled when she stamped the final receipt. "Paid in full," she said. "Congratulations, Mr. Brennan." He drove back to the garage and found Pastor Tom waiting in the lot. "Heard you had some visitors this morning," Tom said carefully. "News travels fast," Harley replied. "It does in a small town." Tom paused, choosing his words. "I also heard they brought you a miracle." Harley thought about that, about the word miracle, and whether it applied to a bunch of bikers with leather vests and hard-lived faces. Then he thought about Margaret and what she would have said. "Not a miracle," he told Tom, "just people being decent to each other." "That's supposed to be the normal thing, isn't it?" Tom smiled. "It is. But normal doesn't make it any less holy." That night, Harley sat in Margaret's chair and opened the drawer. He took out the wedding photo and set it on the desk, where he could see it while he worked. Then he pulled out a fresh ledger and wrote at the top of the first page, "Harley's Garage, new accounts." The next morning, a family from 2 towns over brought in a minivan with a blown transmission. The father looked exhausted, the mother held a sleeping toddler, and neither of them tried to hide their worry when Harley quoted them the repair cost. It was fair, cheaper than most shops, but still more than they had. Harley looked at them for a long moment, then thought about a gray-streaked beard and a voice like gravel and smoke. He thought about an envelope and a phone number and the word family. "Tell you what," Harley said, "I'll get the parts at cost, and you can pay me half now, half whenever you get it together. No interest. The father's eyes went bright. You serious? Dead serious, Harley said. And if you can't get the second half for a while, we'll work something out. The mother started to cry, and the father shook Harley's hand hard enough to hurt. They left 30 minutes later with a promise to return Wednesday, and Harley stood in the bay door, watching them drive away. Danny walked up beside him. That's the second repair this week you've cut a deal on, he said. If you keep doing that, you're not going to make any money. Harley smiled, just a little. I'll make enough, he said, and I'll sleep better doing it this way. He didn't know it yet, but word was already spreading. The family with the minivan would tell their neighbors, the neighbors would tell their friends, and in 6 months, Harley's garage would have more business than he could handle, all from people who'd heard about the old mechanic who still believed in doing right by folks, no matter what it cost him. But that was later. For now, he had a garage to run and a promise to keep. 3 weeks after the bikers came, Harley woke to the sound of hammering. He dressed quickly and drove to the garage, arriving just after dawn to find Wrench and 4 other club members already there, unloading lumber from a flatbed truck. A generator hummed in the corner, and the smell of fresh coffee came from a thermos on the workbench. What's all this? Harley asked. Wrench looked up from the 2x4s he was measuring. Your roof's got 3 leaks, your foundation's cracked in the back corner, and that bay door's been off its track for so long it's a miracle it still opens. We're fixing it. I didn't ask for this, Harley said, but there was no heat in it. You didn't have to, Wrench replied. He straightened up, brushing sawdust off his hands. We were in town anyway. Got a brother whose daughter goes to school here, and we're staying through Thanksgiving. Figured we'd make ourselves useful. Over the next 4 days, the garage was transformed. They fixed the roof, patched the foundation, rehung the bay door, and repainted the sign above the entrance so the letters stood out sharp and clean against the white background. They worked in shifts, some during the day, others in the evening, and they didn't ask for anything in return except coffee and the occasional sandwich from Beth's diner. On the 4th day, as they were packing up their tools, a black Lexus pulled into the lot. Greg Pallister stepped out, tablet in hand, and stopped short when he saw the bikers. His expression flickered between confusion and something that might have been fear. Mr. Brennan, Pallister said, recovering his composure, I wanted to check in, see if you'd reconsidered our offer. Harley wiped his hands on a rag, unhurried. I paid off my debt. Garage is in the black, so no, I haven't reconsidered, and I won't be. Pallister's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. This property is worth twice what we're offering if you wait another year, but you won't make it another year. Not at your age, not with your health. Wrench stepped forward, slow and deliberate. He didn't say anything, just stood next to Harley, arms crossed, his presence a wall of leather and muscle. Behind him, the other bikers stopped what they were doing and turned to watch. Pallister looked from Wrench to Harley and back again. You're really going to let these people intimidate me? Nobody's intimidating anybody, Harley said calmly. These are my friends. They're helping me fix up my shop. You're the one who showed up uninvited to pressure an old man into selling something he doesn't want to sell. I'm trying to help you, Pallister insisted, but his voice had lost its confidence. Then help me by leaving, Harley said, and don't come back. Pallister stood there for another few seconds, looking at the bikers, at the freshly painted sign, at the old man who wouldn't brake. Then he got back in his Lexus and drove away, too fast, his tires kicking up gravel. Wrench watched him go, then turned to Harley. He going to be a problem? Not anymore, Harley said. He felt lighter than he had in months, like a weight he'd been carrying had finally lifted. That evening, after the work was done and the tools were packed, Wrench and his crew gathered in the lot for a final ride out. But before they left, Wrench walked back to Harley and pulled something from inside his vest. It was a patch, leather-backed and hand-stitched, with the words, Honorary Member, and a small winged skull. This doesn't come easy, Wrench said, holding it out. You earn it by living right and standing by your people. You've done both. If you want it, it's yours. Harley took the patch, turning it over in his hands. It was heavier than it looked, weighted with meaning he was only beginning to understand. I'm not sure I deserve this, he said. You do, Wrench said simply. Margaret would have told you the same thing. Harley looked up sharply. How do you know about Margaret? Beth at the diner talks a lot when you get her going. Wrench said with a small smile. She told me about the free meals, the help you two gave to folks who needed it, the way you never asked for anything back. That's the code we live by. You were doing it long before you met us. Harley's throat went tight again. He nodded once, gripping the patch, and Wrench clapped him on the shoulder. Then the bikes fired up, a last chorus of thunder and chrome, and they rolled out into the November twilight. Harley stood in the lot, watching them go, the patch still in his hands. Danny came out from the garage, wiping oil off his fingers. "You going to put that on something?" he asked. "Yeah," Harley said quietly. "I think I will." The next morning, he took Margaret's old denim jacket from the closet, the one she used to wear when she worked in the garden, and he stitched the patch onto the back. It took him an hour, his fingers clumsy with the needle, but when it was done, it looked right. He hung the jacket by the door, where he could see it every time he walked into the garage. Word spread through town about what had happened. People started stopping by, not just for repairs, but to ask questions, to hear the story, to see the old man who'd earned the respect of the Hells Angels. Harley told the story simply, without embellishment, and always ended the same way. "I fixed a bike. They fixed my life. That's what people are supposed to do for each other." Pastor Tom came by on Sunday after service and found Harley working on a carburetor. "You missed church again," Tom said, but he was smiling. "I did," Harley agreed, "but I've been thinking a lot about Grace lately. Figure I've seen it up close." Tom nodded slowly. "Grace comes in strange packages sometimes, not always the ones we expect." "That's the truth," Harley said. In December, the first snow came, and with it, a letter on heavy cardstock. It was an invitation to the Hells Angels' annual Toys for Tots ride, scheduled for the weekend before Christmas. At the bottom, written in that same rough handwriting, was a note: "Ride with us if you want, or just come watch. Either way, you're family." Harley hadn't been on a motorcycle in 15 years, not since his knees started giving him trouble, but he read that invitation 3 times, thinking about the word family, and then he walked out to the back of the garage where his old Sportster sat under a tarp, waiting. Danny helped him uncover it and check the fluids. The battery was dead, but they swapped in a new one, and after a few tries, the engine caught and roared to life. Harley sat on the seat, feeling the vibration through his bones, and smiled wider than he had in years. "You really going to ride with them?" Danny asked, shouting over the engine. "Why not?" Harley shouted back. "I've got the patch, don't I?" On the day of the ride, Harley showed up at the church parking lot where the bikers were gathering. There were more than 70 of them, bikes loaded with wrapped toys and bags of donations, and when Harley rolled in, wearing Margaret's jacket with the patch on the back, they cheered. Wrench walked over, grinning. "Didn't think you'd actually ride." "I'm full of surprises," Harley said. They rode through town in formation, engines rumbling like friendly thunder, and people lined the streets to watch. Children waved, parents took photos, and the whole procession felt less like a motorcycle club and more like a parade of goodwill. At the community center, they unloaded the toys and stayed to help set up for the Christmas distribution. Harley worked side by side with bikers and church volunteers and townspeople, and nobody seemed to notice the differences between them. They were just people doing good work together. Beth brought over coffee and cookies halfway through, and she pulled Harley aside for a moment. "Margaret would be proud of you," she said quietly. "I hope so," Harley replied. "I'm trying to live up to what she taught me." "You're doing more than that," Beth said. "You're teaching the rest of us." As the sun set and the work wound down, Harley found himself standing with Wrench near the bikes, watching kids run through the community center with new toys clutched in their hands. "You ever regret it?" Harley asked. "The way you live, always on the road, no place to really call home?" Wrench thought about that for a long moment. "Home isn't a place," he said finally. "It's the people who have your back when things go bad. By that measure, I've got 100 homes scattered across 10 states. He paused, then added, "And one of them is a garage in Montana, run by a stubborn old man who fixes bikes for free." Harley smiled. "I only did that once." "Once was enough," Wrench said. They stood there in comfortable silence until the cold drove them inside, and that night, for the first time in 2 years, Harley slept without dreaming about debt collectors or foreclosure notices. He dreamed instead about open roads and engine thunder, and the particular kind of family you choose rather than inherit. Spring came early that year, and with it, changes that nobody had quite expected. Harley's Garage became a stopping point for bikers traveling Route 12, a place where you could get honest work at a fair price and a cup of coffee that didn't taste like motor oil. Wrench spread the word through the club network, and soon Harley had a steady stream of business from riders who'd come 100 miles out of their way just to shake his hand. Danny graduated from apprentice to full mechanic, and Harley hired a second kid, a girl named Rosa, who'd grown up turning wrenches on her family's farm equipment. The three of them made a good team, and for the first time in years, Harley started thinking about the future instead of just surviving the present. In April, Pastor Tom approached Harley with an idea. The church wanted to start a community workshop, a place where people could learn basic car maintenance and minor repairs, and they wanted Harley to teach it. "Just one Saturday a month," Tom said. "Share what you know with folks who can't afford a mechanic." Harley agreed, and the first workshop drew 15 people, from teenagers to retirees. He taught them how to change oil, replace brake pads, check tire pressure, basic things that could save them hundreds of dollars in shop fees. At the end of the day, one of the students, a single mother with 3 kids, hugged him and said, "You just gave me back my independence." That became the pattern. Once a month, Harley would close the garage early and head to the church, where he'd spend 4 hours teaching people to take care of their vehicles. Danny and Rosa started helping, and soon the workshops had a waiting list. In May, Wrench called to say he'd be passing through with his daughter, who'd just graduated high school. They stopped at the garage on a Tuesday afternoon, and Harley met Sarah Calloway, a quiet girl with her father's eyes and her own leather jacket. She was heading to community college in the fall to study nursing, and Wrench was so proud he could barely contain it. "Wanted her to meet you," Wrench said, standing back while Sarah and Harley talked about motorcycles in Montana and what it meant to help people. "Wanted her to see what it looks like when someone lives by a code." Before they left, Sarah asked if she could take a photo with Harley in front of the garage. He agreed, feeling awkward, but she insisted. "My dad talks about you all the time," she said. "You're kind of famous in the club. The guy who reminded everyone why we do what we do." After they left, Harley went back inside and found Rosa grinning at him. "You're blushing," she said. "Am not," Harley grumbled, but he was. That summer, the developer's company went bankrupt after a corruption scandal involving kickbacks and fraudulent loans. The news broke in the local paper, and within a week, 3 of the properties they'd bought on Main Street went up for sale at reasonable prices. A young couple bought the old drugstore and turned it into a cafe. An artist from Billings opened a gallery in the former hardware store. Slowly, the town started coming back to life. Harley read about it in Beth's diner over breakfast, and she slid into the booth across from him with a knowing smile. "Guess you outlasted them after all," she said. "Wasn't trying to outlast anybody," Harley replied, "just trying to keep my head above water." "Well, you did more than that," Beth said. "You reminded this town what it means to look out for each other." "That's worth more than any development deal." In August, on the 2-year anniversary of Margaret's death, Harley closed the garage and rode out to the small cemetery on the edge of town. He sat by her grave for a long time, telling her about everything that had happened, about the bikers and the debt, and the community that had formed around second chances and unexpected kindness. "You were right," he said finally, his voice quiet in the summer heat. "Kindness costs us nothing we can't afford to lose, and it comes back tenfold in ways we never see coming." A breeze moved through the grass, and Harley chose to believe it was her way of agreeing. That fall, the Hells Angels chapter made Harley's Garage an official stop up on their annual memorial ride, the one that honored fallen members. 70 bikes rolled through town in September, and Harley stood in the lot with Margaret's jacket on, the honorary patch visible for everyone to see, and watched them arrive like old friends coming home. They stayed 2 days, fixing things around town that needed fixing, helping elderly residents with yard work, painting the community center, doing the small kindnesses that made a difference. On the second evening, they held a barbecue in the church parking lot, and the whole town came out. Harley stood with Wrench near the grills, watching people who'd probably never met a biker, before laughing and sharing food with men and women covered in leather and ink. "This what you had in mind?" Harley asked. Better, Wrench said. We wanted to pay you back. Turns out we did something bigger. We reminded people that community isn't about where you're from or what you look like. It's about who shows up when things get hard. You learned that from me? Harley asked, surprised. We already knew it, Wrench said. You just reminded us to live it. As the sun went down and the music started, Harley found himself dancing with Beth, his bad knees protesting, but his heart too full to care. Around them, bikers and townspeople and church volunteers moved together, and the lines that usually separated people seemed to disappear in the firelight. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the cleanup was underway, Danny pulled Harley aside. I've been thinking, the young man said, about maybe staying on long term. Learning the business, really learning it. If you'd be willing to teach me. Harley looked at his apprentice, seeing the sincerity in his face, and thought about legacies and what it meant to pass something on. I'd be honored, he said. That night, Harley drove home past the garage with its fresh paint and straight roof and the sign that glowed under the streetlight. He thought about the boy he'd been, the man he'd become, the wife he'd lost, and the family he'd found in the most unlikely of places. He thought about a broken motorcycle and a decision to show kindness without expectation of return, and how that single moment had changed everything. And he understood, finally, what Margaret had been trying to tell him all those years. That grace wasn't something you earned or deserved. It was something you gave, freely, and without counting the cost, trusting that it would come back to you in its own time, in its own way. He parked in his driveway and sat for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled, and smiled. Harley Brennan was 73 years old, his hands still hurt, and he still had more work than he could finish in a day. But his garage was paid for, his town was healing, and he had a family that stretched from Montana to the Pacific and back again. That, he thought, was more than enough. 5 years later, Harley's garage still stands on Main Street, a landmark and a testament. The monthly workshops have expanded to include welding and small engine repair, taught by Danny Torres, who bought into the business as a partner. Rosa opened her own shop 2 towns over and sends Harley a Christmas card every year. The Hells Angels Memorial Ride still stops in town each September, and the barbecue at the church has become an annual tradition. Wrench retired from the road last year and moved to Montana permanently, helping his daughter raise her 2 kids while working part-time at the garage. Main Street is fully occupied now, with small businesses and local owners, and the town has stopped shrinking for the first time in 20 years. People credit the turnaround to a lot of things, but those who were there in that first autumn always tell the same story. It started, they say, with an old mechanic who fixed a bike for free, and a biker who understood that kindness is a debt worth repaying. Everything else grew from that one moment of grace. Harley Brennan passed quietly in his sleep at 78, and his funeral filled the church to capacity. Bikers came from 12 states, standing shoulder to shoulder with townspeople and family and friends, all there to honor a man who'd lived by a simple code: help when you can, expect nothing in return, and trust that goodness makes its own way back. They buried him next to Margaret, and on his headstone, beneath his name and dates, they added one line at Wrench's insistence: he rode with honor.